talking about success or failure, we certainly have to discuss about objectives. We certainly have to think about restrictions. And we also should bear in mind what a country sitting in the chair of the presidency, what kind of assets and resources they have. I would like to do the following in the time I have. I would like to talk a bit about the offer, the Hungarian offer, which means the objectives, and on the other hand, the demand, which means the expectations coming from other partners in the European Union. Secondly, I would like to talk about the environment, the context in which the Hungarian presidency has taken place. Thirdly, and I think this is always important, I would like to talk about the resources the Hungarian presidency has. And then I would like to put this together and ask what this meant for the functions a presidency usually takes, and then I would like to ask about the bottom line. So first about supply and demand. What did the Hungarian presidency want to achieve for the goals? I think, as every presidency does, I think that there are basically three core objectives of Budapest. As every presidency does, you have a couple of so-called priorities, i.e. policy objectives. If you look at what Hungary was aiming at, there were basically these four big clusters of priorities: growth and jobs. Second, making Europe stronger. Third, bringing the Union closer to citizens. And fourth, and this is kind of the external dimension, enlargement, especially in the Western Balkans, and taking more responsibility and engaging more prominently in international policy, especially on the peripheries of the European Union, i.e. in the eastern neighborhood in this case. So this is, I think, something where which is a standard part of every presidency. What comes to my mind, and this is also already part of a finding, if you read the priorities, and this is always, of course, a mixture of what is part of the general broader EU agenda and what is, and it's to some extent the result of where the particular national interests of a country lie. We have a clear predilection for emphasizing issues which are situated in the region surrounding Hungary. So the Danube strategy is something which has its main focus in Southeastern Europe. Enlargement of the Western Balkans is something which concerns the direct neighborhood of Hungary. The Roma strategy, of course, is also a problem or a question related to Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, countries in the region. Or if you look at energy, there was a clear intention to develop, especially cooperation in the Visegrad region, building interconnections, achieving progress with the North-South, so-called North-South corridor, and so on. The second element, if you're thinking about the objectives, I think Hungary wanted to send the message of being a country which puts the emphasis on innovation, the revitalization of the single market, and competition. So I think that the broader context of this was Hungary, in this kind of sensitive situation where the European Union, the Eurozone is, wanted to send a clear signal that it's part of the new north in the European Union. If this succeeds or not is still open, I think. And then thirdly, and this is of course a more particular feature of countries which have recently joined the European Union, I think for every country which passes its first presidency, there is an implicit priority, and this is to show that it has a professional apparatus, that there are no major derailments, and that the country, we call it in Germany we call it is Europafähig, Europeable, so that its political and administrative structures are able to smoothly cooperate in the integration process. If we look at this more comprehensively, I think we see that the philosophy or the style of the Hungarian presidency was one with a rather realistic or modest level of ambition. Talking to representatives of Hungary at the end of last year, of the Hungarian government, people mostly said, we know what our weight is, we know what we can achieve, so we are modestly ambitious. So this is kind of the offer. What were the expectations? I think, especially after what has been going on already at domestic political front in Hungary after the elections in spring 2010, the expectations were low. And what was not spelled out explicitly, but very often was kind of the main thrust of the expectations in other member states was, we will be happy if Hungary does not harm, and if there will be no major derailment, and we don't expect Hungary to be a mover and shaper of EU politics, which I think was a combination which was not so bad, kind of realistic ambitions and low expectations. This minimizes the risk of getting into a trap of high expectations which you cannot fulfill. A second kind of section is about the context and the environment and possible external restrictions. Of course, every presidency has to face with various restrictions. What was typical for Hungary, I think, are three things. We had restrictions on the institutional level, of course, with the Lisbon Treaty system. I don't want to elaborate on that. At least a major reduction of presidency competencies in major fields. On the other hand, of course, we had on the policy front a couple of major developments which impacted on the policy debate in the EU. For example, Fukushima and the U-turn, Germany's U-turn in energy policies had, of course, ramifications for the energy policy, which was one of the top priorities of Hungary. The Arab Rebellion shifted the focus of political attention from the eastern peripheries to the south. Migration issues, connected, of course, to the change in North Africa, also, I think, had some implications for the reluctance of some of the member states to enlarge the Schengen zone by Bulgaria and Romania. And of course, the overriding theme of these months and years, the financial crisis. He received something which I think was not typical only for Hungary, which is something which is a challenge for all a hallmark for all presidencies in these, at the current stage, the combination of the Lisbon Treaty system and the high salience of the financial Eurozone crisis means that much of what was traditionally, what could have traditionally been part of a rotating presidency moved to the European Council, moved to Van Rompuy, or moved to the heavyweights, which is, in this case, especially Germany and France. And we all remember the interesting speech of the German Chancellor last fall when she was thinking or laying out a new union method which should be applied in the European Union, whatever it means, but something which is more than traditional intergovernmentalism, but which is clearly something which also was to some extent picked up by Van Rompuy. So these were restrictions. On the other hand, I think we should not forget that there were also some rather positive context factors giving, or which would have given Hungary quite considerable leeway to it. So there was, for example, there was no major gridlock on the question of institutional reform. An overriding issue in the past, for example, for the German presidency. There was no strong presidency immediately before the Hungarian one. Problem for the Czech Republic in 2009 when the French kind of hijacked parts of the Czech agenda. I think there was also no legacy of conflict with the Commission. Of course, there were these squabbles around the media law, about the extra taxes for companies, but for example, the rather constructive relationship between Prime Minister Orban and Commission President Barroso, which obviously also has something to do with their party political background, kind of outweighed these conflicts. Also, of course, EPP solidarity should not be underestimated in a time when we have a political landscape in the European Union which is strongly, of course, conservative or Christian Democrat. Or lastly, there was no end-term commission and no EP elections. So there was we had these restrictions on the institutional side, on the policy side, but we also had some factors which would have given Hungary quite considerable leeway. Finally, resources. Resources are an important means to success. What kind of resources has the Hungarian presidency disposed of? I think overall the resources were rather limited. Of course, Hungary is a medium-sized country, I would say a small country in the European Union. This means the political potential, of course, is rather restricted. This means that the administrative apparatus, although, in my opinion, having quite well prepared the whole endeavor, but the apparatus is, of course, small. Then another important question is, I think, credibility and trust is an important resource for a successful presidency. And here, of course, this resource was rather limited, apart from a couple of special relationships, like, for example, the exes, what was the good contacts between Prime Minister Orban and Chancellor Merkel. But in a general sense, I think Budapest did not command of a high level of credibility and trust as a resource. And then I think Hungary also lacked intensive special contacts or bridgeheads within the Council Secretariat, within the External Action Service, or within the Commission, which is, of course, is not typical, only a problem for Hungary, but which also might have played. So, if you lay these things together, i.e. realistic ambitions, modest expectations, limited resources, and a context which was not unfavorable, but to some extent pushed the presidency on the sidelines. This had substantial consequences for the role profile of the Hungarian presidency. What were these implications? If you look at the traditional functions of presidencies, which are highlighted in the literature, with some simplification, let's say there are four core functions. The one of the organizer, the one of the broker, the one of the stimulator, and the one of the strategic leader. If you look at these traditional functions of a presidency, I would say Hungary has done decent work in organizing and managing the current business. If you look at the brokerage function, where most of the member states kind of follow the ideal of the honest broker and the mediator, I would say yes, Hungary has tried to be such a honest broker, but on the one hand, it was kind of nudged into the role of a bystander due to what I said earlier. For example, the ESM stuff and so on was done mainly by the Van Rompuy team, or the Euro Plus Pact was of course initiated quite unilaterally by Germany and France. On the other hand, we saw also the intention to build bridges wherever it was possible. So if you look at what had happened some days ago with the low-carbon roadmap to 2050, with a low-carbon roadmap 2050 and Poland's no to more ambitious objectives, you can say this was a failure because no consensus was reached. On the other hand, there were at least conclusions of the presidency, which have, of course, another political meaning than a compromise and a consensus. However, there was some sort of a way out. Initiatives, I think, yes, Hungary was not a big stimulator, but launched some initiatives which had these kind of mainly regional impact. And finally, the question of the strategic leadership. Here I would say almost zero, but not because Hungary wasn't able to do this, but because of the structural problems we have, structural shifts, and because even countries like Germany and France at the time present are not really able to provide strategic guidance to the EU. So what is the bottom line of that? Failure or success? I would say three things are characteristic, and if we talk about the footprint of Hungary. First, again, I think the Hungarian presidency will remain in our memory as one which tried to put forward initiatives which have mainly a regional outreach. It did not really succeed in sending this message of a country which is a core engine of competition and innovation. Second, the presidency was hijacked by the domestic situations, so that the Hungarian government had to face kind of the 3 Ds: try to decouple the European agenda and the domestic problems. Second, to defend itself, and third, to distract the attention from this domestic squabbles. And thirdly, I would say Hungary played mainly the role of an unspectacular presidency, which was an assistant in many respects, and a service provider rather than a mover and shaper of the European integration process. So I think it was a modest success if you look at the European agenda stricto sensu, but it was a flawed success because what was done on the European level was kind of overshadowed and distorted by domestic problems. Thank you.